Hello, and welcome to episode number 354 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, a podcast about the latest hotness, and a podcast about how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. This is our first episode back from the break. We can ignore whatever came before because it was lacking in red. But Neelan and Mark, you are here. Say hello.
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 That is, you heard the tones of Neelan and Mark, the orange and green tank. I never respectively, or did I have that backwards? Strike that, reverse it.
No, you got
I don't
respectively.
remember.
That works.
Just move forward. And I am the red tank. Today on the show, we are going to be talking about remakes and remasters in the board gaming year 2026. There's a lot of them, you know? There's a lot of them. There's board game franchises now, and we have some thoughts. But before we have some thoughts, we have some games that we have played. Neelan's going to talk to us about Agent Avenue. Kellen, myself, is going to talk to us about Seven Empires. And Mark is going to finish us off with the latest hotness, Stellar Ventures. I'm glad you... Well, actually, I don't know if you replied to the email. I almost replied to the email, Mark.
Funny you say that, because I made a point last week to say to Mark, this game looks cool. Please follow up. I want to play this.
Oh, yeah. It was like 3 men could not have a shared email.
Yeah.
Okay, that let that be the lesson, because it's like I star things, hoping that one of them will take care of it, and then I reply to things that maybe someone else wanted to reply.
Only one of us goes in there and actually deletes emails.
Yeah. This is like Google was smart, you know, with how they set it up, and you're not supposed to share. So, and then I get notifications like a pixel is trying to access your Gmail, and I'm like, God, get out of here with these Android devices. All right, Neelan, kick us off. Agent Avenue.
Yeah, so Agent Avenue has been a lovely little surprise. This is a very small, I dare say, micro card game for, you know, ostensibly 2 or 4 players, but I've only played it at 2 players, so that's all I'm going to be talking about, and I actually don't even know how the 4-player game works. But what Agent Avenue is all about is effectively just a little circular track. You have your meeple on one side, your opponent has their meeple on the other side, and all you're trying to do is run around that circle and catch the opponent's meeple. The first person to overtake the other player wins the game. How do you do this? Everyone's going to have, or both players rather, are going to have a hand of cards, and those cards are pretty simply just a number, which is always going to be positive, negative, or 0. And it's as simple as if you play the card that has a +4 on it, you're going to go forward in your track. If you play the card that has -2 on it, you're going to go backwards in your track, which seems really, really, really dumb and really, really simple, except this has got a little bit of a choose mechanic. I don't even know if that's the right way to describe it exactly. I cut, you choose. To some extent, you're choosing 2 cards from your hand. You're putting them in front of you, one of them face down, one of them face up. And then your opponent is choosing whether they want the secret face down card or the face up card. So they have some knowledge of what's in the offering, or they can just sort of take their luck in the face down gamble card, you know?
So it's like, am I bluffing you?
That's exactly it. It's a game of mind games and bluffings. It's like, I think you're really going to be enticed by this card, but are you going to secretly think that I'm tricking you and, you know, the one that's face down is better? And where this gets especially interesting is the majority of the cards in this game typically have 3 numbers in them. You can kind of think of them like a step 1, a step 2, and a step 3. And if you get multiples of that card, you're activating the first number, the second number, or the third number. So some of the cards, let's say the Sentinel card, has a 0, a 2, and a 6 in it. So it does nothing for you the first time you get it. You move forward 2 the second time you get it, and then you move forward 6, which is a huge chunk the third time you get it. So cards have different values, whether you're the one receiving them, whether the opponent is the one receiving them. And there's this very cool kind of game of like, well, they're going to be very tempted by this because it's the third one, but they don't know that if I get the one that's down here, it's going to be really, really good for me. And so on. And then some of the cards, in addition to this, will just be instant wins and losses on that third activation. So there are times where you're riding that line between, okay, well, this card could be really good, but I'm 2 of 3 cards towards an instant win. So really fun, great, simple mind game bluff dynamics in this. There's an advanced variant, which I would definitely recommend, which kind of adds special spots on the track that give you bonus cards that you can get if you land on those spots as well, because that kind of just like ups the ante a little bit, where not only are you trying to catch up to the player, but if you get the exact right amount or to move onto one of those spots, you're getting these quite powerful bonuses as well. So very simple rule set. Highly recommend this. I've had lots of fun playing this. Games are like lightning quick. You just play 3 games back to back to back. That's Agent Avenue.
Is it like a meta game about trying to hide the fact that you're a furry or not?
I think that might be the theme. Yeah, I've not dug it into too much, but that's probably exactly what it is. Like, you're trying to catch the person on your block who might be a furry and expose them.
Well,
not expose them in that way, Kevin.
This is a children's show. Oh, well, your words, not mine.
Expose them for the deviant that they are. No furries on my block, thank you.
Okay, but the art, Neelan, I'm not lying here.
It's anthropomorphic animals. That's what we're doing, for sure. It's got a kind of very like Saturday morning cartoon Disney kind of vibe to it in terms of the art. It's cute. I like it. I know you don't like anthropomorphic animals.
I got a chance to play this on BGA. I don't know if it's still on BGA, but yeah, I found it very interesting. And again, nothing that you haven't seen before, like the I split you choose, and nothing overly complicated. But the bluffing and the whole, like, they know that if I get my third of this kind of card, I'm going to jump ahead a lot. So would they have allowed that to be the card that I could get? Or are they trying to sucker me into getting it because they think I'm going to double think them and take a bad card or whatever? So yeah, just a lot of those interesting bluffing plays that I thought was well done in the sort of format that it's presented in.
Totally. And it never gets old. Every single time you trick the other person into like taking the exact card that you wanted them to take, it just feels good.
Right.
So
yeah,
love that.
I feel like I'm being tricked right now. This leader of the pack card would not be on a Saturday morning cartoon. Let me just tell you that.
I don't know which one you mean, and now I'm worried.
All right, and this is where you say, and that's Agent Avenue.
And that is Agent Avenue.
All right. I am excited to talk to you about Seven Empires. And Mark, I'm particularly excited to talk to you because Neelan and I actually got to play this together. Seven Empires is a Mac Gertz game of notable games from him. Most notable, Imperial 2030, the greatest sci-fi board game of all time. Imperial 2030 is in my top 50 board games ever created, and it is a system that is Imperial, then Imperial 2030, and Seven Empires is, if you squint at it really hard, a reimplementation of Imperial 2030. So what is Seven Empires? It is a more Eurofied version of Imperial 2030, where you are playing it's like Europe in the age of absolutism. What is that? Like, you're playing Great Britain, Russia.
Yeah. I don't know what the age of absolutism is, but like, yeah, it's
Russia.
Yeah, it's
still around.
Yeah, I don't even know what time period this even is, to be honest. But it's all it's all very oldie versions of.
It's all historical.
Yeah, it's historical.
It's all above board. And in this game, you are acting, and this is similar to Imperial 2030, you are taking turns for countries based on how much you have invested in them. So there is the idea of stocks in this game, and so you could be heavily invested in Great Britain. Neelan could also have stock in Great Britain that will pay out for him at the end of the game, but if I have the most stock in Great Britain, I'm going to mostly be taking Great Britain's turns. And so you may end up in the game where you're controlling multiple countries and you're doing things like attack, or you're doing things like expanding your empire, you're building your palaces, and you may end up having no control over any countries. And that is sort of one of the weirdest flow things about the game that is super compelling and interesting. In this game, you can take a turn for a country if you have some influence in them, but not the most. If you don't have any countries that you have the most influence in available to take a turn, which is a big difference from Imperial. What are you doing in the game? Well, there are 5 actions, and they are very simple. Things like build and deploy, or move and fight, or attack, or build palaces, or empires. So there are 3 sort of move and attack actions, and there are 2 sort of scoring actions. Palace allows you to build palaces, and then you score points based on the amount of crowns and palaces around on that country's board. Empire counts the flags in your land and sea region. So there's sort of two ways to be scoring points for that country. But again, you are not scoring points for yourself. You are scoring points for that country. And then at the end of the game, the final score for each empire is used to determine their total points, as in the highest scoring country will get ×7. So that means all the stock that you have in that country is multiplied by ×7, ×6, ×5, ×4, ×3, ×2, ×1. So it's relative scoring, meaning that even if you have the most stock in the country, you're going to ×1 versus ×7. So you could score quite a bit off of having a minority possession of one of the other countries. In Imperial 2030, Mr. Gertz loves his rondelles and uses that to great effect. Here, I think it's just a rondelle by another picture, Neelan. Because what it is you have... It is, Neelan.
But
everything is a
really.
rondelle.
Okay, I would say the big difference... Well, yes, it's a shared rondelle, effectively, right? Because, yeah, everyone's kind of moving the same marker. Yeah, sure. Kind of.
You have 3 actions available to you, and then when you take one of those actions, it sort of gets timed out for multiple turns and then gets added back to the board. Effectively meaning you can take one of those 3 actions, but then no matter what, you're going to be too far away for a couple of turns. So there's a bigger Euro interest in planning out the actions of a country. So I think it's very hard to describe on a podcast a game like Seven Empires because it does feel almost unlike anything else. And the only thing it really does feel like is Imperial 2030, one of my favorite board games ever created. What I will say is it is shorter than Imperial 2030. The money has been taken out of the system. So one of the things that you do in Imperial 2030 is you try to suck up money out of a country and crash and burn it. Here you are only waiting till the end of the game and using your stocks to sort of invest. This feels like it rewards a little more forward planning, and it's a little less chaotic and a little less fun. But don't tell anyone I said that. So I think there's a lot to love here. I do think it's one twist to Euro. I like the length a lot better. But I don't know. Neelan, what was your take on our play of Seven Empires?
I remember kind of having a pretty similar reaction, which is that I liked it, but I don't remember liking it as much as I liked Imperial, which is tough because with the exception being the game length, which I agree is obviously a plus. Although it was still a very long game, so it's not like it.
Fair.
It's not like it turned it into okay, we're going to break this out in an easy afternoon or anything like that. It's still a meaty game. I got the sense, and maybe some of this could be me misremembering Imperial, which is been a while since we played, but it felt a little bit more train gamey, a little bit more like stock trading as your main path, not stock trading rather, but smart investing being your correct path to victory versus seizing control of something at the right time in order to take the action and get the money out, which was the heart of Imperial, right? Because effectively the majority of your points are just paid out at the end based on which countries you're most invested in, how well they've done over the course of the game. So, I'm snatching up countries towards the end that I may have had no part in, but are just the most valuable countries. So yeah, it felt maybe a little bit more in that direction to me.
Yes, a little less spiky. The way in which you acquire shares is much different. At the end of each round, there's kind of a random that you could asterisk dislike, different system who gets to choose stock first. So it's by player order in some cases. It's by who has this pawn that's moving around in other cases, where I think there's a little bit more free form structure to the Imperial system. And I do think that makes it feel a little more just like a cube rails game, kind of. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I would love to play it many more times to bore it out, but I think that in Imperial 2030, we had many more games where just tanking a country or ramming a country into another country to help a third country was happening. And in this, it felt like that would be perhaps too punitive. And you basically were just trying to get all the countries you were invested in to pay out. But this one more than that one because Neelan's invested in that one. And so if this country wins, okay, then I'm actually helping Daniel and I'm helping Christina, but Neelan might still win. So there's a lot of that sort of calculating happening.
Right.
And then combined with kind of an action selection where, oh, this country isn't actually going to be able to score again because all of those are now timed out. And then there's also some weird turn order shenanigans where if you don't have a country capable of moving, you actually get to choose another player who acts on your turn and then their country moves. But like that sucks because they may be moving way out of the turn order that they want to be moving, or it can be very, very impactful. It's also not something you can control that much. But I am holding on to this. I think there's a place for both in the collection. I would love to play it a few more times. It did remind me a little bit of Bloodstones for whatever reason, another more recent and kind of restricted. Like it makes it seem like it's this free-form, open-ended thing, but then there's like more specific turns you probably should be taking on the first couple of turns to build out the different countries.
That was the Wallace one, right?
That's correct. Mark, you jealous?
Well, I'm interested at the very least. So this, as you said, sounds like a little more Eurofied Imperial. So does this, you think, hold more appeal for people who might be interested in a game like Imperial or Imperial 2030 but want it to be less sort of spiky? Is that the sort of crowd that would be more interested in? Like, hey, I'm interested in playing Imperial 2030, but I don't know if I'm interested in a game where I can have my countries tanked or, as you said, sort of like forced into battle or stuff like that. Some of that has been rounded off, and so it's more of an appealing game for like a Euro-centered player?
Yeah, it's like calling it a Euro, I think, is definitely a disservice because the nature of just like you may not have a turn this round because you don't control the country and then someone could take control of the country from you feels very unique or interesting. So it's like a shared incentives train-esque stock game, but like the board game that you're playing is a dudes on a map area control, right? Yeah. So, like, it's like a good summation of those things. And I do think it's over before it has enough time to really just, like, derail and a country, like, blows up another country all the way, which, like, helps. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a good, like, Kellenism that I think about a lot when it comes to, like, designs like this, which is where have they deliberately put the gates on what you're able to do? And you can kind of feel that more in this than you can in Imperial. It's like, I can't do this action over and over again. Oh, I can't take 3 turns in a row. Oh, I can't do this. You know, like you can see all of those very specifically added to the design to basically to make it less spiky.
Yeah, interesting.
It's good. Another game it reminded us of was the East India Companies, which I'm not sure if I covered on the show or not, but
we did.
That's a way more Euro game with shared incentives. This is certainly like a pretty unique experience and one that I would love for people to try if they're ever. It's sort of like there are people who will never play Imperial 2030. I'll bet you could convince your Euro friends to at least try this one time, and that is already an improvement. Mr. Gertz, we see your rondel. Don't lie to us. It may look different, but we see those circles. That is 7 Empires.
I got a chance to play a review copy of Stellar Ventures. This is a game designed by Pontus Nilsson and published by Tabletopist Games. Before I get into it, I just wanted to admit from the start that I've only had a chance to play this once. This is because I haven't had it very long, because after it was sent to me from Utah and made its way here to Vegas, it then somehow found itself being diverted to Texas before finally getting back to me here in Vegas. So don't blame me. Don't blame the publisher. Blame the U.S. Postal Service for me not having a chance to play it more than once. Anyway, as I mentioned, this was designed by Pontus Nilsson, a designer I was not familiar with, who I don't believe has very many published designs, though their work seems to be focused around train games, specifically Cube Rail and 18XX varieties of train games. I assume people who have listened to the show are somewhat familiar with these types of games, but as a quick overview, while both these types of games deal with the world of trains, Cube Rail games tend to be pretty abstracted. Not that 18XX games aren't abstracted, but generally Cube Rail games are simpler, quicker affairs where putting the rails down of the trains on the map and any stock market or ownership aspect of owning the companies, the different train companies, tends to be generally pretty streamlined. On the other hand, 18xx games are generally much grander affairs. The rail building tends to be more precise and more considered, and the stock market and ownership aspects of those games can be quite robust. You know, a cube rail game usually runs about 90 minutes, whereas an 18xx game very easily can go into the 4 or 5 hour range. Now, other games have certainly melded these two worlds to varying degrees, so the fact that Stellar Ventures is a combination of these two types of train games, though much more heavily on the cube rail side in the case of Stellar Ventures. That combination in and of itself isn't unique. It's just that there are a bunch of aspects of the game that are unique, I would say. And I would say the least of these unique factors is the fact that this is a train game in space. As the name implies, these train companies that you're running and buying into aren't really train companies. They are, wink wink, space shipping corporations. This makes the game unique on its face, you know, just the fact that you're doing this train game in space, but in and of itself isn't doing that much. Just the fact that you're in space isn't really much other than a reskin, but it's the way that the game incorporates this outer space theme that makes it really unique. So in Stellar Ventures, you're going to be doing the kinds of stuff that you do in many cube rail or 18xx games. You're going to be auctioning shares of companies. The money that is used to auction these shares are going to go into the company treasuries, where they're then going to be spent to like space track, I guess. You're going to try to maneuver your ships to lucrative planets and try to get there before other companies get in your way, the same as you would in a lot of 18xx and cube rail games. You're going to need to balance releasing more shares for auction to add more money into the company against knowing that every time you release a new share, you're diluting the value of the shares that you own. And perhaps if you release enough shares, maybe somebody else takes control of your company and now they control it and have influence over it. So those kind of considerations are going to be present in this game. Speaking of diluting shares, the way that the shares pay out is also an interesting aspect. There are 3 things taken into account when considering how much money a company makes. Every round, and this is only a 5-round game, companies are going to release dividends, give money to the shareholders. So the way it works is sort of interesting. The way you figure out how much money a company makes is you figure out how many of these planets you have arrived to, you've linked to, and how, again, lucrative these planets are. You're also going to need to purchase rockets to ship your goods. Again, there's no shipping. You're not actually delivering any goods, but you need to buy more and more technologically advanced rocket ships to represent being able to deliver cargo. These rockets, as you buy them, they get like better and better, more technologically advanced. And there's a chance that the older rockets that you've purchased are going to become obsolete. So 18xx gamers out there will recognize this as what's called train rust in those games. So if you've got a company that only has the old rockets and they become obsolete, you now suddenly have to have money to buy the new updated rockets or somehow find a way to get money.
Philosophical question.
Yes.
Why, if we could do anything we want in a board game, would we let the trains rust or the rockets go obsolete instead of firing them at each other?
Well, okay, first of all, how are you firing the trains at each other?
Well, you could just ram a train into the other train,
true.
you know?
You know what? I
Like
think
an oil baron.
in much the same way that I would say Stellar Ventures is breaking new ground in cube rail and 18xx games, I think what you have proposed would revolutionize those genres. A lot of people have talked about how 18xx
Yeah, they haven't seen it.
is boring
Yeah.
and all these people sit around for 5 hours. I think if you were able to blast trains into other trains in 18xx games, I think we would finally be able to open this up to like a larger market of people who would be interested in it. There's not enough firing
Yeah, it's
trains.
about widening the aperture.
Yeah, that's right.
I will say, like, as far as widening the aperture goes, I do think that, like, why are there not more train games that aren't themed around trains? I know that's going to sound really stupid.
Sure.
But, like, why has no one done this more? Like, just put a more interesting theme on your route building, stock trading game that isn't...
On your Excel spreadsheet?
Exactly.
What?
I mean,
Did I
Like,
hear
I'm interested. Like,
Yes.
Mark's been begging me to play an 18x game for like 10 years. I'm going to play Stellar Ventures, I'll tell you that much. It's got spaceships in it.
I think there's something to that. I mean, I think one of the things that sort of slow that down or restrict that a more interesting theme is because when people play, I think, Cube Rail games or 18xx games, they have certain things in mind that they want to see, like laying track or buying stock. Of course, you could abstract that into other like
perverts.
Into other genres, but sometimes I think it's harder to do one-to-one. But it's been done before. Like I would say, City of the Big Shoulders. Kellen is dying laughing. I don't know what it is.
It's just like you like pulled out the rule book and you're like, all right, the first rule is you can lay track in this game, and then it's like
everyone
a bunch of
up.
people going, oh, I love to see it. Love to see it.
But it has been done before. City of the Big Shoulders was a take on this that is different, and I think you enjoyed our play of that. So maybe this is.
I love that game. I absolutely adore City of the Big Shoulders. Yeah, what I'm saying is I would probably like the games a whole lot more if they weren't train themed.
I agree. I agree with There's certainly been done before, but not very often. And I think maybe Stellar Ventures will open up a new design space because I think it does a lot of things well. So. Getting back to really quick. So I won't belabor the whole way that you make money, but it's an interesting take on it where it's not just the cities that you can hit and the strength of your train as it would be in a lot of those games. It is a sort of balancing act between how strong your rockets are in this case and which planets you visited. So it's just an interesting take on releasing dividends per round. So again, Cube Rail and 18xx players and people who've played those games at all will hear a lot of familiar things in my explanation of how the game works. However, there are a lot of things that are really fresh takes and will not be as recognizable, such as when the initial auction. So a lot of these games have initial auctions where you will auction off to start the game the first share of companies. Same thing happens here, except in the order that the companies are auctioned, when you buy a company, a first share in a company in Stellar Ventures, you also will assign it a power. So this is, again, something that's been done before, but these are like, space-themed power. So it lends a unique sort of asymmetric power, which is cool. And there are a number that are available. So, every game will be different. And also, where your company starts is something you have to consider when selecting the company and the power. So there's a lot of things that go into that initial choice. Furthermore, I think that this game addresses issues that people have had in those other types of games in really interesting ways. Like a lot of these games, Stellar Ventures, for example, is a game where only the person who runs a company can decide whether or not to release more shares in a company. That's something that you've seen before. And you'll often find yourself playing one of these games and wishing that you had more control over which stocks were available. Or if somebody's hoarding a company or holding back, that can be a frustrating thing. Well, Stellar Ventures has this interesting aspect to it where there's a phase every round of the game where you can try to do a hostile takeover and force a share to be released and to be auctioned over. It takes a special kind of capital you have to spend that in order to force this share to be put up, but it makes for an interesting dynamic in the game where somebody might be running a company really well and would ideally want to hold on to it themselves, but you can force them to sell it. And maybe you can force them to do that when you are the one who has the most money. So it's just that's a very unique aspect of the game. However, the most unique aspect, this is the thing that I think sets Stellar Ventures apart, is the fact that because it's in space, it's got this alien faction that is non-controlled by any of the players. And it's represented by these alien planets around the board. And anytime you lay track, space track, whatever, or I guess they're called outposts in this game, to an alien planet, you get this alien artifact or alien, crystal or whatever. And you can spend those in order to take special actions. That's one thing. But the more interesting aspect, and that's interesting in and of itself, the fact that you're going around trying to pick up this resource in order to do these really special actions is very, very cool in and of itself. But even more cool, I would argue, is the fact that when you hit one of these planets, you can choose whether or not to sign the agreement. Okay, so this is this whole thing out of left field, this agreement. Okay, what this is you are then selling a share to the aliens. You're basically taking them on board as investors. Okay, I'll try to make this quick, but it's this dynamic in the game where you can agree to sell a share to the aliens to have them invest, which injects cash into your company. They pay out a fairly large cash injection to all the shareholders of the company. So that's really great. Furthermore, because now you're with the aliens, you get another asymmetric power. even cooler. Now you're like have a second power that you get to pick. However, there's now a thing where the aliens now have an expectation of how well you're going to run the company. There is this randomized factor where the aliens are going to expect a certain stock price that's going to go higher and higher throughout the game. Now, it may go very, very high, or it may not go very high based on this random aspect where their expectations are randomized when certain things happen, whenever you visit an alien planet. So when you sign this agreement with them, you don't know if this is going to mean a really high expectation or they're going to be okay with you running it maybe less than optimally. They may have like an expectation you'll never meet, or they may be more reserved than that. Because at the end of the game, if you're one of the companies that has signed this agreement with the aliens and have not fulfilled what they expect, your share price at the end, normally at the end of this game, for every share you have a company, you will make money based on how well the company's been run. It's like basically like each share will be worth a certain value based on how well the company's done, and you'll cash that out in the game. However, if you're one of the companies that has signed this agreement and you haven't met the alien expectation, every share that you have is worth $1. And it's this like very, very interesting aspect of the game where now you've gotten this cash injection, you've gotten this new player power, everything's really cool, but now you've got to run the company really, really well. Or maybe you abandon it and just say, hey, I'll take the cash injection and I'll just like give up on the fact that I'm going to run this enough to make the shares worth something at the end. There are a lot of really, really cool aspects to Stellar Ventures. I would say that if you are a fan of cube rails, this is a must. I mean, this, I would say, definitely try this out. If you're a fan of 18xx games and you dabble in games that are lighter, because this game I think would run most people in about 90 minutes. It's sort of cube rail length, maybe 2 hours. I would say definitely try it out as well. For anyone else, I would say if you're interested in cube rails, if you've seen games like Chicago Express or the Iron Rails games, I would say give this one a shot. I think this does a lot of things in a, again, just the theme alone gives it a cool, fresh, different feeling to it, and it may not feel like as staid or as boring as a lot of the train games in a way that sort of Kellen has alluded to. So yeah, I was a really, really big fan of this. I'm very, very eager to play with you guys come Dice Tower West. Yeah, just a really, really cool take on the cube rail 18xx genres.
Yeah, that all sounds great. Like that sounds like something I'm very jazzed to now play as well.
Yeah, and it has an interactivity that is one of my favorite things about these kind of games. It has it in spades. There's like a lot of negotiation at the table. There's a lot of like, again, trying to get somebody to run a company in a certain way. I didn't mention this, but there's opportunities to use your own money on a company. That's something you don't get in a lot of train games. Like sometimes you feel beholden to the person running the company because they're doing it in a way you don't want. This game allows you to spend your own money. It's just a lot of really interesting ways to deal with quote unquote issues in cube rail games or things people don't like in those type of games in just really, to my eyes, fresh ways. Just a really, really interesting design. So that is Stellar Ventures, designed by Pontus Nilsson and published by Tabletopus Games. When this review comes out, there will be a couple days left on Kickstarter. So I would say if you're interested, do your due diligence. But if you want to get in on Kickstarter, your time is running out. Again, this was a review copy provided by Tabletopus.
It funded in 14 minutes.
Wow. It's got to be a record, right? That never happens.
No comment. All right. It does. Just a reminder, if you are a patron and you're at Dice Tower West, we are throwing a party. We are all doing a lot of work. It is a lovely night of board games. Super fun time. You should have received an email about it. If you join the Patreon, just email us and we'll get back to you. It's a super lovely time. Dice Tower West, it's happening. It's next month.
Can't wait.
Wow, wow, wow. All right. We are here to talk about reimagined and re-implementations of board games in the year 2025. And I think the impetus for this topic, obviously Seven Empires, what constitutes a re-implementation on BGG is we could probably talk about for 17 hours because it's very unclear how that happens, but we won't because people don't want us to argue. We spent 3 episodes arguing in good faith, making comedy gold for you, and now we will be serious. I think that I am more likely in 2025 to gravitate to a game that is a remake or reimplementation than a net new board game. And I feel like this is a new feeling. Neelan and Mark, how do you reply?
I think I probably agree with you on the whole. If the two buckets of games were brand new game by, random designer, random publisher versus reimplementation of a tried and true game, I would probably go with the latter. I still think that the number one deciding factor with me would be, designer or publisher. But if those were sort of randomized and it was either brand new game or reimplementation or remake, I would probably go with the latter, just because I would feel much more confident in the quality of the product.
There's like a rational and emotional component to this for me, where it's like, yeah, rationally, I think that makes sense and I would be aligned, where it's like, yeah, if I wanted to be more, to Mark's point, confident that what I was going to be getting was going to be a great game, then sure, yeah, take a beloved existing design, or perhaps even a not so beloved existing design that had a lot of potential, refine it, work on it, re-release it in some capacity, sure. But I think that I still I'm always attracted to the magic and the appeal of like something new and different that we haven't seen before. Not to say that I'm like entirely immune to the host of remakes and reimplementations that we're getting a lot of recently. But yeah, I think it's broadly speaking, I would say I still want to be excited and charmed by something new, something brand new.
Yeah, I think Mark, maybe not to tell Neelan he didn't, but Mark kind of made me think about this another way. It's actually like, what I'm saying is I am facing a filtering problem in 2026 with all of the board games that come out.
Sure, yeah.
And so this change in my habits, let's call it, or thought process, where I think 10 years ago I would be like, don't repackage the same game and sell it to me again, bro or gal, is now one of like, well, someone believed this was good enough to drag out of the bargain basement and put a fresh coat of paint on it, change a couple things. And so the filtering is being done already for me, and that prevents me from having to look at the thousands and thousands of games. And then I think the other component of this is perhaps a very cynical Kellen in 2026, sort of like, Neelan, and this isn't really the topic, but I'm actually curious, like, do you believe that, I'm trying to phrase the question, that the best board game you've ever played, like game, not like play of game, but game, is ahead of you or has already happened?
Oh, God, wow.
No, I think that's a great question.
Yeah, what an
genuinely
existential
great question.
question.
But I also think that
not like I'm getting older and my
no.
friends are dying or whatever, but
so I will say, just to say, answer the question, I think the best game is ahead of me. I do think that question is very philosophical and is less a matter of the quality of games so much as like what you want from games. Does that make sense? Because I think we've had conversations to the same extent before of like, are board games always improving? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
and I think I'm always on the
right.
other side of that line, which is to say that like, the way that I'm evaluating game design is probably different from the way that the two of you are evaluating game design. And like, there's not a right or a wrong way to answer that question, or a good or a bad way, but like, I am not looking for something that made me feel how I felt 10 years ago. If anything, I'm looking for like the opposite of that. I want to experience new things and then sort of feel game design evolving into directions that are different from what it's done in the past. So that will always strike me as improvement, just like on a fundamental level.
Question, Neelan, what do you think is the hit rate on that? What is the hit rate on wholly new published games that have no remake that do that for you? Like, what is the success rate approximately?
I mean, look, it's very rare. It's obviously very rare, right? Like, I think the most recent example of something is Clocktower, which is not that new anymore. But I also, like, to some extent, I'm the person that's probably changing, like, my top three more frequently over the history of the podcast. I think my number one game has changed 3 times over the course of doing this show compared to the two of you. And I think that, like, that doesn't say anything necessarily, but I think that, like, I don't know. I do think that, like, it's low just because it should be low. Like, I don't think your best game should roll around every year, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But like, I expect, and I say this in all honesty, I expect that my new favorite game will come out within the next 10 years. You know?
Well, all I know is that I have seen that there will be a new version of Biblios coming out, or so I've read. So I expect that my favorite game will be ahead of me.
Yes. He erred with For the King and Me, but the optimist in your heart
That's right.
still believes in Dr. Finn.
I will say that I think what feels like the happy medium to me, because I agree, like, I know there have been different versions of Azul, but what I'm thinking about specifically now is like there's Azul and Azul Mini and Azul Chocolate or whatever, where they're like it's the same game but like sort of repackaged. And even the other Azuls, like they feel, I mean, I guess they are fairly distinct. But what I like, or what makes me the most like excited, is when a game that has been maybe like released a while ago and often by a designer that we know has chops, maybe we knew it at the time, or in retrospect we know that they are a solid designer, that was maybe perhaps like underappreciated in its time, given a new coat of paint and a re-release. So maybe like not the same game published in a slightly different way or with like a slightly different theme, but games like, and you know, we've talked about this game a ton, but I think it's like the most clear example that springs to mind now. Quo Vadis. I remember playing Quo Vadis back in the day, where it was like it had a very generic theme, and the game was very well designed, very typically Knizia, you know, no fat on it whatsoever. And I remember liking it, but having not many people like around me had played it at the time, and it wasn't like a game that was necessarily in the board gaming zeitgeist. And then with Zoo Vadis, it got a lot of like the modern touches, like the asymmetric powers and stuff like that, without getting bloated. But that was a situation where I knew that the bones of the game were really, really good, and it was a game that was underappreciated and that I might not have ever played again because nobody would be really interested in playing Quo Vadis, given the presentation, given what it was like. But having it released with some of the modern sensibilities, I was very much excited in that. And I think that's like the best situation, where it's a game that was released a while ago, or people who have played it know that it's like a solid design, or we know it's a solid design based on the publisher or based on the designer, and it's just given a new life now where the bones are solid, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say that I think what Bitewing Games is doing is probably best in class here, right? Because the other example that immediately comes to mind is Beowulf the Legend, which is an absolutely insane game of silliness and fun that they redid as Ego, where they smoothed it just enough for modern audiences, but didn't do too much, took it out of the Beowulf theme that fell out of favor hundreds of years ago. And, you know, they're doing it again right now with, I don't know how to say that. Mark, you've covered it. Spectaculum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Close enough. Better than I would.
That was right. Oh, wow. That's a rare compliment. Is currently on Kickstarter as Gold Country. And they're sort of taking these games that were maybe B-tier Knizia games, fresh coat of paint, modern thought process, rerunning them through. And like the hit rate on these games is, in my opinion, just going to be much, much higher than just a random game from 2026. Is anyone backing Gold Country, or am I doing it?
You're doing it.
Let's do it live.
I'm glad we're having the conversation now, because I was going to make sure that someone did.
All right. Who's the chicken? Well, we know Mark's not going to do it because he can't admire laying track. I guess it's a train game, right?
Yeah, more or less.
Oh, well, now I'm interested. Can you shoot trains at other trains? Because then I'm sold.
Yeah, there's no shooting. Okay, so Bitewing does it best in class. No comment. No, we did make comments. No comment. No questions. Mark, I do want to circle back because you did bring up Azul, which I find is like not what I'm talking about, but I do want to talk about it. Like, you're talking about a board game franchise.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
We're on Fast and the Furious 17, I think, but it's about the family, you know? Uh-huh. And here's the question. We'll keep playing pop quiz here. Zool, fantastic game. Very fun, hate drafting. We all really enjoy it, right? Like, I mean, more or less, like, good game. Are you more or less likely to try another game in the Azul line? Like, Azul Stained Glass comes out. Do you want to play it? more than another random abstract 4-player game or less? I'm more.
I think I'm more, but only slightly, and I think that is because, at least in the case of the Azul line, I remember I don't remember which one it was, but the very first couple of Azul, the non-Azul, like Stained Glass of Sintra or whatever the first couple of games in the Azul line were, didn't really knock my socks off or weren't especially exciting to me. And so I quickly sort of like shifted all those games in my head to like the not so great category. And so I was like less eager for those. But if you're going to say, do you want to play the new Azul versus a completely random new abstract game, in that case, I would probably go with the Azul because I would feel confident that it had been, play tested well, and it would be like a sound game, and I would have just more confidence in that. Now, if you give me the choice between a new Azul and a new abstract by a designer I'm interested in or a publisher that I feel confident in, that makes it a tougher call. But there is some inherent, I think, quality and trust that I lend to a game that is in the line, even if it just has the Azul name and nothing else. There's something implied there that allows me to trust it more, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right, because like the hope is that the level of quality control that brought you Azul and brought other games, in that franchise, assuming you like the franchise, you assume that that's going to continue to deliver, right? And that is even, I would say, separate from the notion that like, okay, I like the core mechanic of Azul, so I'm probably going to like games that use that core mechanic in different ways, even though Azul has somewhat steered from that. But like, I know this is not the point, but like, I find it hard to pick my favorite Azul amongst the first three of those releases. I think Stained Glass and Summer Pavilion are both very good for slightly different reasons, like, yeah, I think that the answer to the question is definitely a more for me. Like, I am definitely more inclined to pick up. If you told me there was a new Azul out tomorrow, I would be buying it tomorrow. Like, that's how much traction I have from just the quality of that franchise, as it were, quote unquote, across the board. Whereas if you told me that Kramer and Kiesling were releasing a abstract game, or sorry, it's not both of them, right? It's just one of them. Whoever the one that did Azul is releasing an abstract tomorrow, like, I would still be excited and interested, obviously, but it might not necessarily be a buy it tomorrow situation.
Oh, interesting.
So franchises work.
Franchises work.
Even though I want to say they don't. It's become clear to me that the marketing has worked on all of us. And those, maybe they don't even qualify as reimplementations, more as franchises, depending on which one. I think some of them are, but some of them aren't even in square shapes anymore.
Oh, I mean,
what is sacred? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
With Azul?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of opinions on Azul Queen's Garden, which barely feels like an Azul game anymore. So, like, yeah, at some point it's, what are we even doing? But yeah.
Nealon, do you know this? Are all the Azul line games, are they all designed by Kramer or Kiesling or whoever? I think it's Kiesling. Are they all?
I am going to say that every single one of them is done by. I'm going to just. You know what? For the sake of just getting this right, I'm going to look it up. All of them are done by Kiesling. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I was not aware of that. Yeah.
What about the refinement expansions, which we've had in the last few years? I think the easiest one is Dune Imperium came out. And then there's the standalone expansion sequel, Dune Imperium Uprising, which, depending on who you are, is just like a straight-up upgrade. That sucks for everyone who bought Dune Imperium. You got, but we now have Uprising, which is clearly better a couple of years later. Totally cool with it? Or still mad, bro?
Less cool, I would say, because, as someone that loves Dune Imperium and would tell almost anyone get Uprising as the first step, there is still a part of me that's a little bit like, well, would I actually like Dune Imperium with all of the expansions more than I would like Uprising? I'm never going to find out because I'm just not going to go down that road. That's like madness,
Sure.
Yeah, I think that when you don't have... Oh, it's funny because it's like, I was going to say that like almost exhibits like lack of confidence in a product to some extent, but that's, it's not, because that was just the smartest move. They made a better, refined version of the game and they convinced everyone that already had the game to buy it again. So it's like, it's the best of both worlds from their perspective, right? But like, yeah, it's something about that does make me mad a little bit. I guess from a consumer perspective, it makes me mad because it adds uncertainty to the product.
Yeah. Well, as of right now, the 5th best board game of all time is Dune Imperium, and the 7th best board game of all time is Dune Imperium Uprising. So this is good for business, no matter what we think.
I want to bring up 2 niche genres of board gaming where I think the reimplementation and remakes are especially successful, or at least work for me quite a bit, and that is the previously mentioned 18xx and I would say even the Cube Rail games, as well as war games. So these are both like genres of games that have been around for a long, long time. And whenever I see a 18xx or Cube Rail game get a new printing or like a reimplementation or a remake or whatever, I'm especially interested in those games because these are games where when they were first released, often by Winsome or these smaller publishers, they were released like, very small print runs, very, very low component quality. People would say these are fantastic games, but they are like the component quality was so low that just made it unappealing to try. And, it was often there weren't very many copies and you have to really seek them out, and you're paying over the odds for these games that are like, again, not especially nice on the table. But I found like, you think about the Iron Rail games, Irish Gauge, and those games, if you compare the original printings of those games versus these nice printings by Capstone, it's just such a more inviting, well-produced experience. So for those genres, the 18xx games, there's a lot of these 18xx games that have super, super small original runs, and were, a lot of these are produced by hand. They're very, very like cobbled together is too pejorative, but just not super high component quality. And there are a lot of companies now like All Aboard Games that have done really, really nice remakes and just make these games much more appealing and put them on my radar for games to play. Because often, again, these games were well received critically when they first came out. It was just like the productions weren't up to snuff, and now these are giving those games a chance to like shine as brightly as they sort of deserve. And the same goes for war games. A lot of the older war games, were these hex encounter things where the pieces are really small pieces of cardboard and just, again, of their time and not really up to the grade in modern times. But whenever I see a war game is being re-released with a nice box or really, really nice components, I feel like, okay, this is a really good one, because like this is a game that was critically, acclaimed enough in the past that they are willing to re-release it. And those are the games that like I will gravitate towards. There's been a lot of re-releases of older war games that are done with more modern sensibilities, and in my experience, they almost always hit when they're redone because they're solid games and they're now like presented in a way that is more aligned with what modern gamers would expect.
Yeah, that kind of like hits on something that I also kind of really like in this space, which is when you're very specifically nudging a game in a direction for a different audience, right? There are more extreme or less extreme examples of this, right? I think that the way that we spoke about Seven Empires earlier as the Eurified push of Imperial, right? Or a lot of people consider Brass Birmingham the slightly more Eurified reimplementation of Lancashire, for example. But like I always like, especially when you're like going a little bit more extreme than that, like here's the reimplementation of the game or the re-release of the game that halves the length or makes it sort of more interactive. Or like one of the things I've loved, like Bruno Cathala has been on this tear of like redoing games is like these very refined 2-player reimplementations of them. I just kind of love that. I like taking the core of something and very specifically molding it in a direction that's quite different from the original while sort of maintaining the core of what it is. I love that a lot. That is something that's always going to excite me the most, I think, in this camp of like reimplementations.
It's funny because I don't know that I like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because it's like, well, I just want, like, I think I've said this forever, is that, like, I just want the best version of something, and so my assumption is that the newer version is better, is bigger, is prettier, is refined, is streamlined.
Right. Whereas that's not the intent here, right? It's like, well, this is better in this one specific case.
Yeah. And I think maybe more, this is re-implemented, but for 2, or this is re-implemented, but for Euroheads. We could call it Euro Slop. Do we want to start that?
Sure, why not?
Euro Slop. That'll get them going.
One thing I kind of wanted to also just quickly touch on, this is because it falls so securely in the curiosity camp for me. So A Feast for Odin is still in my top 3 favorite games of all time. And there's a reimplementation of it coming out, I want to say this year. Oh no, I lie. It's going on to Kickstarter this year, which is in itself a little bit worrying, but called The Danes. That is kind of it's a little bit unclear about what it is, but to some extent it is an overhaul that is still 80% the same. And I don't know what that means exactly, but every now and again they sort of put out sort of designer notes about stuff that's being added to it, and how do you add things to a game like A Feast for Odin that already has 1 million spaces. So there's a lot, I assume, that is also changing to accommodate that. The way that the home boards look is completely wild. It's just, there's a lot going on there, and I'm very curious to see where this goes. Even though the prospect of sort of taking something that I love as much as A Feast for Odin and messing with it at all is very scary. That's also just, it's the exciting sort of scary, where it's man, what if I like this even more than A Feast for Odin? That's just a wild possibility for me.
And Feast for Odin is such an interesting game in this discussion because of the whole Norwegians, the fact that Norwegians was an expansion that was actually more of a patch. And so you're sort of getting in the Dune Uprising space there. There is a feeling that you kind of, this is too strong a word, but you kind of got tricked or forced, maybe is a better word, into buying the Norwegians because it fixed issues that were in Feast for Odin. Although I know that Norwegians is well acclaimed by fans of the game, and I think most fans are happy that it came out. But it's just an interesting sort of
and
evolution.
Also, I would also say the counterpoint to that is that if the Norwegians never existed, A Feast for Odin would still be a phenomenal game.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's anything that's fundamentally broken in the original.
Sure.
Fishing?
Maybe a little bit. Farming, so animal husbandry, maybe a little bit, but that's okay.
It's a weird line though, right? Because if it's 80% plus the same game, it's the same game.
Right.
And then if it's 50% the same game, I'm okay, they just slapped the Danes onto this.
Sure.
Because homeboy Uwe has, made 17 games that are all spiritually similar.
Right.
They're all at least 20% the same. So it's the spectrum of if they're 20% the same, they can be different games. If they're 50%, it's is this a cash grab? And so,
right.
But I think as a super fan of the game, sure, nothing is more exciting than eagerly refreshing F5ing, and you're going to be super excited to hit back. You're going to be the first backer, Neil.
I will say a couple of things scare me about this. It's apparently in a Gloomhaven-sized box, and is going to be 90 minutes per player. So
90 minutes per player?
Neil,
is that what you said? 90 minutes per player?
It'll be fine. Yeah, it'll be fine, Mark. Don't worry.
Oh,
we'll love it. God. You and me, 3-hour game of the Danes.
Yeah, but that's 90 minutes per player is what they're writing on the box, Neil.
I don't know. Look, that's just what this one thread is saying. So I don't know what's true anymore about the Danes.
So if the 4 of us, if you, me, Kellen, and Christina play this at Dice Tower West
Kellen's
2027,
always promised me that we would do this on my birthday.
Yeah, so we're talking about a 6-hour
Board Game Barrage, the Danes.
Remakes? Oh, yeah.
A 4-player game of Danes is going to be 6 hours? Is that what we're saying? Pencil in a quick 6 hours?
That's easy. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Quick six.
Quick six and we're done.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah.
It'll definitely be worth it. I think that's going to do it for our thoughts on remakes, remasters. No, we didn't even get to remasters. Reimagined and cash grab franchises. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the show. Tell us what you think at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. One of the 3 of us will look at your email and then hopefully push it off to someone else to not reply to it. You can find us in Discord. Our Discord is at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. That's it. And goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.